Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. We are back during our whole Zombie Appreciation Month, and got a lot of great movies that we've been discussing this month. So we're just going to keep the ball rolling with another one. I'm your host, Kevin L. Powers, and I have some special guests to talk with you or with me today about the movie Night of the Creeps. I know this is a very big fan favorite film from the '80s, so I'm really excited to be getting into this movie. With that, we're going to be talking with Sarah Panozzo and Thomas Tinnerello, who are two of our regular special guests for the show. I'm sure that we're going to have a very fun conversation today that will entertain you through your drive to work or just your leisure time at home. So, without further ado, let's all jump in. I know we are different generations. Normally, when we talk about '80s movies, I usually watch these movies when they first come out, whereas some of our other special guests weren't alive then, so they weren't able to do that. So
thanks, Kevin.
Well, no, this is Kevin's way of saying I'm an old guy and y'all are a bunch of kids.
But this is so much fun when I talk to people about movies like this. So, Panozzo, I have to know, what were your impressions of this film when you first saw it, and when in fact did you watch this movie for the first time?
So I watched it for the first time ever last night.
Oh my God.
I had never seen it. I've heard of it for a long time. Very familiar with Tom Atkins and the stuff he's done in horror. So I thought it was hilarious that yet again, he is a police officer who just can't get away from tragedy. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I didn't like the main character, Chris, at all. I thought he was not great, but it was a lot of fun. There were a lot of very fun quotes, and just the B movie magic is fantastic.
Okay. What about you, Thomas?
Well, I first encountered this movie, and I'm probably going to get off on a little bit of a tangent here because this is a bit of a soapbox moment for me here. So the way I first encountered a censored commercial version of this was on a horror hosted show called Creature Features with Dr. Paul Bearer on WTOG, St. Petersburg, Florida, one Saturday afternoon. Dr. Paul Bearer was kind of a horror host who looked like a corpse with a weird eye that was actually a glass eye. And he felt like kind of our special secret because he was a horror host just for the southern area, specifically. I think he started in South Carolina, and in the early 70s, he moved down to Florida, and that's where he did his show up until the day he died in 1995. And I would watch Dr. Paul pretty much every Saturday, unless I had something I had to do that was. But like he was a horror, very typical kind of horror host, but he had a charm all of his own. He would do sketches with a plastic spider with a human head named Benjamin Bach, and occasionally in between segments of the movie, he would do which by the way he would always say today's horrible old movie is Night of the Creeps. And it's very horrible if my name isn't Dr. Paul Bearer. So he would always say whatever movie he was playing was horrible. So there were a lot of bad movies in there, but there were also a lot of good ones, like this one. And Dr. Paul would also do lip syncing a song called Poisoning Pigeons in the Park on his piano. And that's a sadistic, beautiful, fun song about poisoning pigeons in the park in springtime. So YouTube that, guys. It's hilarious. He was big down in my hometown too. Like he would be like Grand Marshal of the Gasparilla Pirate Parade. He did a whole like special show from Busch Gardens one year. And I feel like I'm taking a while to talk about him because I feel like not too long ago there was a like documentary about the history of horror hosts. Mm-hmm. And horror hosts are a huge part of the horror community, and rightfully so, because they're the way that many of us see these movies for the first time. And unfortunately, in that documentary, as really well researched and great and enjoyable as it was, none of the Southern hosts were featured in that doc. It was like almost 3 hours long, and they didn't talk about any of the Southern hosts like Dr. Paul. So I feel like Dr. Paul Bearer shouldn't be forgotten. especially when he meant so much to so many people. So I just want to use this little platform to let everybody know about the legacy of Dr. Paul Bearer, and he'll always be lurking for you, which was his tagline. So yeah, that's kind of my origin with this movie. And we'll talk about this a little earlier too, but the version I saw in Dr. Paul Bearer had the good ending, which is part of the whole reason why this movie sticks with me. And we'll talk about why it's the good ending.
Okay, so now we got your first impressions of the movie out of the way. Essentially, for those who may or may not have been born when this movie was made, Night of the Creeps has to do with some space aliens that just happen to crash land on Earth and get stuck in a human corpse. And of course, these two, I think college, right? They're college kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are college kids. Actually, the aliens, there's like several different aliens here, because they don't really, there's an implication that these squat looking bubblegum skinned like garbage pail kid or aborted baby type things, which is what they look like to me. They were experimenting with like a weapon or something, and one of these bubblegum creature alien things steals that weapon and jets it into space. But if you look very closely at the alien that they're chasing, he has white eyes. The other ones have regular black eyes. So that alien is a zombie alien, which is probably the first time in movie history, unless you're talking about like Zombies in the Stratosphere, which was a movie serial from the 30s. This is the first zombie alien that we've probably seen in a movie.
Well, like watching it for the first time, I was sitting there and I was like, oh, this guy's trying to escape. He's trying to do something good. And then he launches it into space and it crash lands. And I was like, oh no, he's the bad guy.
Yeah. But at least now you look at it and go, oh, at least it wasn't his fault. He was under the control of the creeps, which are these little lightning fast leech things that scuttle around everywhere. And it's an amazing effect because, like, I still can't figure out how they did it.
How they did it?
I think it was mostly pull strings, because there were a couple times through the grass you could see, like, not necessarily the string, but you can see where it was in the grass at some point. But
for sure, but like you can't see it. But like during the bathroom scene, which I'm ahead a little later, that's the one place where you think you would see the strings, because it's like white tile, but you don't see anything. It's amazing.
Yeah, you are correct on that. So I don't know if I want to get to that just yet, but the two college kids who end up going to the morgue and finding this body for a prank, and then inadvertently unleash what do we call it? We just call them creeps. Is that what we're gonna call it? The slug thing, just creeps?
They don't have a name in the movie proper.
Yeah, they just call them creeps at one point, I think.
I guess, but see, to me, like, I always thought the creeps in the title were the dates.
Yeah, that's what
which they are. And it's so funny because one of the girls say, don't these creeps take no for an answer? And I was like, this is fantastic. But I think that's the only time they're referred to as creeps.
Yeah, I mean, when I originally saw the movie, they play up the whole thing about the dates. Your dates are here, but they're all dead. And so I always kind of saw those as the creeps, and not so much the monsters as the creeps. It's kind of like critters. The Krites aren't really critters. They're called Krites in the movie, and the critters is just the name of the movie, and that's kind of how I saw this as well. But I never had a name for the slugs. I just called them slugs.
Yeah, I mean, they're not really slugs because they don't move like slugs.
They're space slugs.
They're space slugs. Oh,
yeah, I mean, you're right, Kevin. They are aliens, but they're not like fresh aliens. In a way, they're kind of like the xenomorphs, and that like the xenomorphs are genetically engineered by aliens in the same way these were genetically engineered by aliens, presumably to, I guess, as a weapon of war, because I would imagine this would be very handy on the battlefield. Although they do have some fringe benefits to the corpses and or humans that they inhabit, and we'll talk about that a little later. I was surprised run the rewatch at that to realize that, oh, there's a good side to getting a creep inside your brain. But yeah, Kevin, we you're right. They do steal a body from what they think is a morgue. It is not. It is a secret research lab on campus? Question mark.
Yes.
Yes.
Which they get into because David Paymer, the lab guy, forgot the one bit of combination.
And the computer is so easy that literally a child could do it. Like, how?
Yeah, it totally is. But like they get in there and there's literally just one dead body in this like carbon freeze type thing. It's like right out of Star Wars. But like you just see it there all serene, and it's like, hey, there's no other dead bodies here. We gotta get it. We gotta use this one. Oh look, it says disengage. Press the button, disengage. It's now defrosted. But where this thing comes from though is interesting too, because it kind of behooves us to go back a step and think, what is it about this movie that has endured for so long? Why are we talking about it? What is it about this thing that is a little magical? It's not a lot, but it is a little magical. So Fred Dekker is the director of this movie. He also did Monster Squad.
Yep.
And he wrote House with William Catt, the original script.
He also did RoboCop 3.
I was going to mention RoboCop 3. You should never, ever, ever mention that movie. Everything else Fred Dekker did was great. And then he does RoboCop 3.
Even The Predator?
No.
That has its moments. Overall, it's not a great movie, but it has some redeeming qualities. RoboCop 3 has no redeeming qualities.
Not at all. Not at all. But this movie's qualities, I think, it's a nostalgia fest, but it's also kind of a cinematic experiment. Because Fred Dekker said he purposely tried to put every horror cliche in one movie. I'm not entirely certain if he was successful on that front, but what he does with these cliches, for the most part, I think works. But it's like a 50s nostalgia in the 80s, because we start off in black and white in the 50s.
Yeah, and I mean, he wanted to film the whole thing in black and white, I believe. And I was really excited when it started off in black and white then in the 50s. I thought we were going to get a whole movie like that because it would have been perfect.
That would have been amazing. And to this day, I don't think anyone's ever done that. Where you take a movie set in the 50s with all the 50s tropes and the 50s tropey people, but all the characters behave realistically, and you have like modern gore and modern effects, but it's all in the 50s and it's all with the people talking the lingo of the 50s. None of this modern dialogue or anything. I don't think anyone's ever done that. Peter Jackson came close with Dead Alive, but Dead Alive is in color, and also it's not very 50s. Like when people told me that Dead Alive was supposed to be in the 50s, I was like, really? I didn't get that from watching it, but okay. But yeah, to this day, this would have been it, though. If Fred Dekker had his way, if the studio didn't come in and muck it up, this would have been it. But yeah. So, but yeah, it starts off in the 50s in a Lover's Lane type thing, and they see the meteor come. And just like the Blob, some idiot takes his date to the crash site. Hey, I'm going to poke it with a stick. And doesn't quite.
But then you add the whole other trope on top of that of it's not just aliens. There's a crazy murderer with an axe out there too. And it's like,
I'm about to say that too. He was like, yeah, they got a whole bunch of trope. I didn't think about you mentioning that there's a lot of these old cliches that were thrown in there, but you're absolutely right.
There are so many.
And he's not just any maniac. He's an escaped mental hospital maniac. And they make sure you know that from the radio broadcast while the poor girl is just sitting there. And she actually looks at the sign that says, like, Crestview Mental.
She turns on the light to reveal the rest of the sign saying it's that area.
Yeah, so she's like, Jerry, or whatever his name is, we gotta go. But she knows she's dead. She knows it, I think. But, like, I was a little confused at first because I knew that there was, just from my recollection of it on this new rewatch, I was confused as to the timeline of when the creeps got into the serial killer, because later on, Tom Atkins, who we find out is a young rookie cop in the 50s, and he's the one who discovers their bodies and her body in pieces all over the highway. But because he has a dream where the axe murderer is hacking her away in the car, but he turns around and he's all dead. He's a zombie. So we're watching a little confused. It's like, okay, so when does the killer become creepified or zombified?
I don't think he does until the events of the movie. I think when Cryo Johnny comes out of stasis, he
Right. Like that.
Yeah, but when he comes out of stasis, I think that's when we first get the slugs.
Yeah.
And then like hinted towards the end where they go towards the cemetery, they can take over dead bodies no matter how far gone the brains are. I mean, look at what happened with the brains in the basement that are just in glass jars.
Yeah.
So I think it was only during the movie that he actually got it, because otherwise this would have happened much, much sooner.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. And I think that's one thing this movie doesn't quite work we never really get a crystal clear image of what the rules are for these slug zombies, or more specifically, we don't really ever know just how long their incubation period is once you get the slug in your brain. Because for some people it's like seconds.
Yeah.
Some people it takes hours. And it's implied that Cryo Johnny probably took hours, because by the time Tom Atkins called it in, nobody else got infected, because there wasn't a zombie apocalypse back in the 50s that we're referring to ever. So clearly they had this whole situation contained back in 1950, whatever it was. And for whatever reason, they stuck this guy on ice to study the effects of it. Whatever they figured out from it, we'll never know, because JC and what main guy's name, who I can't remember now,
Chris
and JC screwed the whole freaking thing up. So yeah,
doesn't
it's
really
a little
matter. The details. You do know we've been talking about these crazy 80s horror movies, and there's logic is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, pretty much. But you also notice that in the 50s segment, the girls are talking about, waiting for Cryo Johnny to show up and all the anticipation of it. And while the Tom Atkins ex-girlfriend is looking out the window, waiting for Cryo Johnny to show up, one of the other girls is talking on the phone saying, "Oh, did you guys see it?" It's talking, I guess, to her den mother or something, saying, did you see Plan 9 from Outer? And cuts out. So that is our first clue that this movie is basically a very loose remake of Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was the first space zombie movie, really, if you think about it.
And then they're watching it later. The house mother is watching it later.
Yeah, because Fred Decker really wants you to know that. He hacks it into your brain.
Well, the other thing is, because it's in the public domain, he could have used Night of the Living Dead like everyone else uses.
But but you're right. But he wanted to be different. He wanted this, because that's what's different about this movie in terms of the zombies. Although let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen, this is a zombie movie, kinda, but the zombies are really just one part of it. Because as we said before, there's an axe murderer, and also most of the time, I think it's pretty 50-50 between zombie action and creeper action.
Yeah.
And there's also aliens at the beginning of the movie and at the end in the good version. But yeah, like the creepers themselves are a substantial threat because of how fast they move. They go everywhere, and they can just go right into your mouth. And that's the only place they seem to be able to get into.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Could be like some of the other aliens out there that just gets into any orifice.
Yeah.
It just needs a mouth.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a nice variety, at least in this movie. But also, in most zombie lore, we know, shoot it in the head, that's how you know it's dead. But in this movie, shooting it in the head is kind of the worst thing you can possibly do. Because all that does is just create more spawn of the creeps, and they just scuttle around and make more zombies. So you have to do it as a kind of, because later on, JC thankfully tells us after he gets zombified that you can kill them with fire. Although there's an implication that you could also kill them with a lawnmower.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing of him being in the bathroom and lighting the matches on fire, like that would have not been my first instinct of let's light a book of matches on fire and throw it on the ground and hope they go towards it. But then they also had a flamethrower in their storage lockup at the police department, which doesn't make sense either.
No, it doesn't. But it
Police
gives us a
department.
great opportunity. It gives us a great opportunity to have a scene between Tom Atkins and
I
Dick
know.
Miller. And that's all it needs, man.
So, getting to Tom Atkins. So we all know he has played a cop in virtually 99% of the movies that he's ever been in, from My Bloody Valentine remake to Maniac Cop to
Halloween 3.
Well, he was a doctor in Halloween 3. Even though he acted like a cop the whole time.
The entire movie, I thought he was a cop. I was like, he's not a doctor.
He's not a doctor. You don't believe he's a doctor. He's a cop.
He's a doctor cop.
And he's like, but he's a detective trying to figure out everything. So yeah, he's really a cop.
Detective Tom Atkins, MD.
Dr. Cop. That should be a movie. That should be a Tom Atkins movie. Dr. Cop, rated R.
But this is the movie where he has the greatest one-liners and the greatest lines.
Oh my gosh.
And are all quotable. Like, I rewatched Maniac Cop, and I don't remember there being any really quotable lines he has. We just remember him as being cop. Or, some of the other movies he's done, like Halloween 3, you don't really remember any of the special lines he has. But this movie right here has some of the greatest lines in his career that he will always be familiar with. Or be known for. So,
well, yeah. I mean, there's a reason, I think, why Tom Atkins has said many times this is his favorite of all of his movies.
Mm-hmm. He did also say that he would come back for this again if they were going to make another one.
A reboot, like they're doing everything else.
Either a reboot or a sequel. He said he would be there for it.
Well, I did read somewhere that James Wan is remaking. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
No, I don't think he is, because I saw similar articles. He said that given the chance, he would love to do this and Chopping Mall, but he would do them in his style instead of the B-movie awesomeness that they are.
So I'm going to take a little tangent because you mentioned James Wan real quick. And I know this is one of your favorite movies of James Wan, Panozzo, which is Malignant, which I really hated. But I had done research on Malignant, and I think it's actually a really brilliant movie. Now, if he took that type of humor and put that towards Night of the Creek,
absolutely,
it would be absolutely brilliant. I think it would be brilliant. I'll have a conversation with you on why I now think Malignant's a good movie when I first saw it and I thought it was horrible as shit. But I had to read some stuff about the movie. I really did. And I had to read a lot of stuff of what James Wan was trying to accomplish, which he did. I just not ready for it when I watched that movie.
Yeah, because it's completely different from his other movies.
It is. And so I think now, with hindsight, he was absolutely brilliant in that execution, and now I can consider that one of his better movies. I think the stuff he achieved in that one is better than what he did in Dead Silence. And I think that if he was to tackle this, he would probably be the only person to get Fred Decker's humor well enough to make it work.
Yeah, I think you might be right about that. And I'm not sure if I'd do the sequel to it, because spoilers, folks, if Tom Atkins were to come back, he'd be a zombie ? But I think it would be more interesting if he had a different character.
And I think that's the best way they could bring him back at this point, because it's 40 years later?
He'd be an old corpse. He could be a cop. He could be a cop. He could be I faced these creeps a long time ago. He could be something like that.
That's the only thing, though, is his charisma would be gone as a zombie.
Half the movie. Oh my God. Like when he's telling the story about what he does to the mental patient and how he buried him. And Chris is like, why are you telling me this? And he's like, I don't know. Takes a long drag from a cigarette and downs his bourbon.
Yeah, I love how he basically abducts him from his prom date to ruin his night or make his night super awesome, depending on your perspective. Because you get to share a drink with the man, the myth, the legend, I mean, I feel like Tom Atkins' kind of legend has grown all the more those last few years. And to those who are uninitiated, I feel like Tom Atkins is sort of like the competent version of Bruce Campbell, except that he's a better actor than Bruce Campbell. Like he's not like Bruce Campbell's characters tend to screw things up even as they're destroying the monster, like in the Evil Dead movies, whereas Tom Atkins' character, as tortured and terrible a cop he is, he's at least competent and smart, especially towards the end, spoilers, where like he's in the bowels of the beast and there's all this, nest of creepers, and he's about to light them all on fire and explode himself and the creepers, we assume. And he's there with duct tape on his mouth because he knows that's how they would get you. See, he puts the freaking duct tape over his glorious mustache and his mouth to make sure those creeps don't get in.
And what happens when he takes the tape off?
Yeah, they go in. You're right. I mean, but at that point, though, he was ready to die anyway.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing is like just a couple scenes before the big climax, he's already destroyed the zombie axe murderer in front of all these other cops, and there was really no repercussions from that. But anyway, so
most of them were not great, anyways. I mean, how many scenes do they have of him being like, "Guys, why can't you do your freaking jobs?" Oh,
that's right. Yeah, the police department is pretty incompetent aside from him in this movie. But also, well, they have to be for a horror movie. But anyway, so like he's sitting there in his room having a bourbon, and you think he's just, just slow burning his through. But then, Chris knocks on his door,
and he starts taking the tape off, I'm like, oh no!
I thought that the tape was to keep the creeps from coming in. I didn't realize until this rewatch why there was such a long creep-in camera move on his stove, and why he walked on and then it was like, ah, damn it.
Because my husband was watching it too, and he was like, no, he was just trying to gas himself. And I'm like, no, he's playing with his lighter while he's sitting on the couch. He was getting ready to explode.
You're right. That's exactly what he was going to do. But thankfully, Chris gives him the opportunity to explode meaningfully.
Yes.
To redeem himself, so to speak.
Yeah. So, like, in researching this, like, I was realizing that Tom Atkins' kind of screen persona has become, like I say, he's kind of like the tortured but also competent version of Bruce Campbell. But it's also kind of a little bit of a Chuck Norris kind of vibe to it, where he's just like the most masculine thing on the planet Earth. And there should be like a list of like Tom Atkins facts, but there isn't. Instead, we have all these glorious Tom Atkins memes out there.
Yeah.
Like most of them are, of course, revolving around his character in Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Like this one I thought was hilarious. Remember, kids, Halloween isn't about some goof in a mask running around killing babysitters. It's about jumping fences, breaking into factories, and getting laid.
Yep.
But there is one for this movie that I think should be our sponsor. It's a beer ad with his glorious face on it, and it says, "After a long night of killing slug-infested zombies, nothing satisfies more than a cool glass of Atkins beer. Atkins, it's chilling and thrilling."
Thrill me. Just so you know, you're right. Tom Atkins played a detective or cop in a lot of fucking shows.
Yeah.
I just want to say a few of them from one of my favorite movies, and I forgot he was a cop in it, which is The Heist from '89. If you've never seen this with Pierce Brosnan, I forgot he was the cop that's after Pierce Brosnan's character. I was like, shit, I've seen a movie a billion times and it just never dawned on me because it wasn't a horror movie. A horror movie wise, he did play a cop in Two Evil Eyes. I forgot about that one.
That's right. Yes.
He played a cop in that too. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He plays a cop in a lot of shit. And like he played cops in everything from the Equalizer TV show to freaking Homicide Live on the Street. I mean, dude, he played nothing but cops.
He was also the dad in Creep Show.
Yeah,
I like to imagine he was probably a cop in that too. We just never saw it.
Especially with his attitude towards his own kid now. I can see him as being a cop in there too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, we should before we move on, we should probably also mention that Atkins plays like when he's first called to the scene to investigate the case of the missing corpse at the beginning of the movie, and talks to all the incompetent cops who are like just like mishandling this whole thing. He does get to do a beat for beat homage to Monster Squad.
Really?
Because because in Monster Squad, when the cop kid's dad, Sean's dad, shows up to investigate the case of the missing mummy, he says, 2,000-year-old dead guys just don't get up and walk by themselves. Cut to
right.
Walking by itself. And in this movie, Tom, the great man, the myth, the legend, says, frozen dead guys from 1950 whatever don't just get up and walk by themselves. Cut to naked frozen cryo Johnny walking by himself. So
you're right.
But also going off of the additional police department, I think that's when I realized, first of all of the names in the movie being horror directors, because you've got like Detective Landis, Sergeant Raimi, Officer Dante, and De Palma. Yeah. And then later on when they say Chris and JC's like full names, I was like, really? Yeah. Like it's literally the entire name.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
James Carpenter Hooper.
Yeah.
Like
although I do like Atkins' nickname for Chris, which is Spanky.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes such a sad moment when he's telling him how JC is dead.
Alfalfa's dead. They got Alfalfa. I did like JC as much as I don't like Chris. I agree with you. He's kind of the black character, but JC is the star of this show.
Yeah,
really.
JC really was. Chris was such a whiny character, and I didn't get it the entire movie. I was like, how is this the main guy? I don't know how this chick is interested in him. JC is freaking awesome, but I gotta say the movie was really progressive for its time, having JC being gay and handicapped and not making any jokes about it at all the entire movie. And
not at all.
The director even came out and said, he was like, why would I? I mean, it doesn't add to the movie. It doesn't add anything to the character. He can just be handicapped. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And JC's like the best friend in the sense, but also I think his dialogue that characterizes Chris, I think, allows us to kind of excuse some of his stupidity, because JC calls him out on his BS.
Yeah.
Right after they unsuccessfully get that corpse. He's like, listen, I spent my whole life trying to make you happy because I know I'm never going to get laid. I might as well, and he just goes on calling out Chris about how he's such a whiner and he's got so much going for him and you don't even freaking appreciate it. So I think that scene was kind of Decker kind of trying to characterize their relationship in a deep way, but also kind of letting the audience know that, yes, we know. He's like, Decker's like saying, I know Chris is a bit of a stupid head. We know. Just move on from it.
I kind of saw that whole thing as them trying to be like, Chris is supposed to be the main good guy with nothing wrong with him, like an old 50s movie, whereas JC was the one who was flawed, but he was the one who actually made more sense than the guy who is the main character. So it was kind of like a balance between, let's show how really average and normal Chris is by having someone that contrasted that. And he ended up being the one that, like you two said, I really like JC more than Chris. He has that sense of humor with him, that flair. He's not afraid of anything. Whereas Chris, it seems like, even though he's the main character, he's the typical white male, as you would say in the 80s movie. He has a typical look, other than he may look a little geeky. He's got that typical straight arrow look, whereas JC has everything that could possibly be wrong with him, but he's the more interesting character.
Absolutely.
I do think they have a wonderful kind of Bill and Ted-esque moment that made me laugh out loud when Cynthia, who by the way her last name is Cynthia Cronenberg, comes to them like, nobody else would believe me. I thought you would too. And she tells her what she saw. She saw a naked man corpse come up to her window and his freaking head exploded and, leeches came out. So she comes to them, and Chris is like, "Yeah, I believe you." Not, and he doesn't say not like Wayne and Garth, but when she looks away, like they look at each other like Bill and Ted and like the air guitar, like, "Yeah, score." I mean, it's terrible, but I thought it was hilarious. And I thought it's because it felt real in a weird way. It felt
Well,
very
it
real.
does. Those
Yeah.
two characters actually feel like they could be real high school friends. The way that their repertoire between each other are, and I think that's one of the things that Fred Decker got right with this, and in Monster Squad especially. The dialogue between characters makes it seem almost so realistic that these could be real people, the audience members. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like us like the JC character, and the Chris character is like, why can't you be more like JC? He's so cool.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
none of them are really cool.
I know, right?
They're both like the outsiders at their school.
Speaking of JC and Monster Squad, we can't not talk about when he's fighting the leeches or the creeps in the bathroom, and the graffiti on the wall.
Mhm.
You can see there is a thing that says Monster Squad rules. So this tells
You saw it. I never
this
saw
tells me that this movie is set in the same universe as Monster Squad. And of course, that made me think, oh, how would the Monster Squad kids have dealt with this menace?
Could be at the same. This could be at the very similar school or same school. That's right next to the middle school / elementary school.
Well, I don't know. I feel like this movie's area kind of has a more like northeast vibe to it. I don't know why I feel that, or no.
No, I would say it's like the California rich kids.
Yes,
like
you're right. You're right. Yeah, I think this is more California. But as we mentioned on our Monster Squad episode, the town Monster Squad takes place and is clearly somewhere in the South, because Dracula's headquarters is located in a southern plantation. The creature from the Black Lagoon comes out of a swamp. It's definitely either it could be anywhere from like South Carolina way down to Georgia or Louisiana. So Monster Squad's got the East Coast covered, and I guess Chris, JC, and Cynthia has got the West Coast covered.
Oh Jesus! That's thinking too much. I'm sure Fred Decker had a much more successful career. He could have expanded more on this. It's a shame that he didn't get to do all that stuff.
I was kind of disappointed after, because I know we've talked about the two different endings a little bit. The one I watched had the original ending where what's his name? Ray comes back and he's burnt, and the slugs explode out of him and go towards the cemetery. And at that point, there was a searchlight, and I was like, what the hell is searching for it? I had completely forgotten about the aliens from the beginning of the movie by the time I got to the end. I was so invested in it. But then I was like looking like, where's Night of the Creeps 2? And I was really disappointed to see that there wasn't one.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear you discover that for the first time. That's great. I love that you watched that version first too, because me too.
The other version. I didn't watch the preferred version until it came out on Blu-ray. I had never seen.
Oh, I'm sad. I'm sad. Ladies and gentlemen, what's especially good about this moment? Let me set it up for y'all who haven't seen it. This happens right after the climax, when Chris and Cynthia have all like tried. Well, they've survived the zombie siege of the night of they survived the creeps, as it were, by using kind of player 1, player 2 method, where like she's got the flamethrower, he's got the shotgun. At least I think it's the way it works. And so you blow it up the head, but once the creeps come out, flamethrower them. Although you really could just skip the step and just stick the flamethrower in their face and boom. But okay, whatever. Anyway, but Tom Atkins, like we mentioned earlier, has got this whole thing figured out. He's down in the basement with the brains, and he blows himself up with his lighter. And Chris gets to say "Thrill me" this time. Detective, thrill me, and boom, he does. But just as we think everything's okay, Chris kisses Cynthia. Blah.
And it's not just kiss. They're like full on making out across from this house that's on fire.
Nothing more romantic. But anyway, like we cut to the street, and all of a sudden up comes zombie Tom Atkins, who is still smoking, even though he's dead. He's still smoking, and
like
then he
his
comes
body smoking, his cigarette smoking.
Yes, he is just a smoking zombie, and his mustache is still on his face even after he's been exploded. And then he falls down, and that's when the little leeches come out, and it's a beautiful like pan up to the night lit cemetery, and it's you can tell now it's a beautiful miniature. But yeah, the spaceship coming down, you're like, what? So at this point, the reason why the ending is so great is because it sets fire to your imagination, because it makes you think what was going to happen next. Because now the aliens are here. But here's another thing, because that's not, knowing that was going to happen. When I saw earlier when they're looking for the zombified killer that Tom Hanks gets buried into the ground back in the 50s and gets hijacked by the creeps. Their searchlight, they're setting out, the cops are searching for them with their searchlights, and they completely miss him. For a little bit, like they're like, there's nobody out here. And then as soon as they put their light away, bam, there's the zombie axe murderer. And I thought, I think this is foreshadowing the ending. I think that I can easily see that the aliens came, used their searchlights, and just completely missed the creeps and leave the planet Earth vulnerable to the new zombie apocalypse, which would be a little disappointing. But I can see that
it definitely could have been a very interesting sequel, because you don't know which aliens you're going to get. Are you going to get creep infested aliens, or are you going to get the aliens who are trying to prevent them from being spread? So you could even have aliens hunting down the creeps, and it would still make sense in the world of this movie.
Yeah, you could. And it could also, what would make it even more interesting is these aliens, we always assume aliens have some kind of, form of right and wrong that jives slightly with ours. But what if they don't? Like, what if the garbage pail kid fetus creatures just do not give a flying frack about humanity and just see us as these things that are getting in the way of getting their weapon back? And you just have these aliens running around with ray guns just annihilating humans so that they can get to the zombies. So like the aliens are not on our side. The zombies clearly are not on our side. So we're just here to fend for ourselves on both sides. We don't know what's worse. So I think that would have been kind of like an Alien versus Predator type thing where, no matter who wins, we lose. That would have been great.
So we all know what you thought about that. And what is that? That ending is considered what? The director's cut, or is that?
Yeah, that's the director's cut. And I thought I read somewhere that was the original theatrical ending. Mm-hmm. But for whatever freaking reason, and I could not find a reason for it, all of the VHS versions and also like the early DVD versions of this movie have this other ending, which we haven't mentioned before, which is what Kevin saw for the first time, which is basically, we haven't talked about the fact that there's a zombie dog in this movie.
Yeah. Or a cat.
And a freaking zombie cat. Oh, the zombie cat I loved. I forgot all about the zombie cat, because maybe in the Dr. Paul Bearer version I saw they cut out the zombie cat, because the zombie cat's rotted face is pretty freaking gnarly. I love that zombie cat because you can see a little worm coming out of its nose.
It's really gross.
It's super gross. Yeah. But there is also a zombie dog in this movie, and the zombie dog runs around infecting people with these leeches, and the zombie dog is actually single-handedly responsible for getting all of the prom date creeps infected, and then in facilitating the zombie horde attack that happens later. And we never see it again.
I really appreciate that dog single-handedly flips a bus.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But like this dog, we forget about him in the director's cut. He never shows up again. But in this other version that I don't like, he just shows up. And Cynthia's like, oh, hey, doggy. And then this little leech comes out of his mouth, and we assume into Cynthia's mouth, and bam, credits. it's so abrupt and it's so upsetting and it's so like it's not nearly as interesting as the director's cut version.
Well,
It doesn't.
It depends. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it doesn't nearly as open up possibilities as the director's cut version. All it does is basically say, "Oh, y'all done fricked up. You forgot about the zombie dog. I guess we're starting all over again." Wah wah wah. It's that's the way it felt to me, and I didn't know that ending even existed until I saw the uncensored version of this on HBO. I think that because it did say that there's some TV viewings of this that have that ending, because I guess in the VHS port. But I saw it on HBO and I was like, wait a minute, that's not how this movie ends. What the heck? And I was so I felt betrayed. I felt like they'd erased this glorious, wonderful ending to this movie that I thought gave it all the character and made it stand out from other movies like it. But I felt like they'd erased it, but thank God they haven't, because like the version that's on Pluto TV right now that you can stream for free does have the director's cut version with it with smoking Tom Atkins.
I was trying to look up. It does say that the original ending was the one with the dog.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original theatrical ending. But Fred Decker preferred the other ending, which probably means that what the studio wanted was something that was more of a jolt ending, because that was the thing. And so, like you said, that was more of a jolt out of nowhere, kind of like the Carrie ending and what was popular in the 80s, that jolt ending. Whereas the other one was like this weird sci-fi ending that kind of left people wondering what the hell was going to happen next.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that was a studio mandated thing. Probably.
Yeah, because I know he wasn't happy with how the studio wanted to cut it either.
Yeah. So you know what? That's a little bit hard because I thought the flow and everything was great for the movie myself. But I can guarantee you that the studio said we're gonna screen this movie in front of people, and they didn't like the dog ending the movie, and so or they didn't like the aliens. They're like, why are these fucking aliens coming back? What's up with these aliens and shit? And they just wanted a more jolt of an ending, so they added the dog back in. Because why? Because people think dogs are cute, and a big slug coming out of it was just a big jolt. Which is why I said that's the reason I didn't watch it theatrically. This is one of the films where I watched it when it was on video. When it came out, I was probably the week it came out on video is probably when my parents rented it and I saw it. And this is another movie, kind of like when we were discussing other movies like Night of the Comet, that I saw a lot of when I was a kid and never really saw it again as I got older, because I never owned a copy of it. I never owned a VHS copy or a DVD copy, and I didn't get the Blu-ray copy until recently, probably 2 years ago, which is when I saw the other ending. It was about 2 years ago. I was like, well, I always knew there was another ending. Like there's there's this huge cult conversation about the movie. There's two endings. I always knew there was two endings, but I never looked on YouTube to look up the ending, which I'm sure everyone did. I am like you now. I do enjoy the director's preferred ending. I do. I enjoy that one more. But I can appreciate the original ending because I'm an 80s kid, and that was pretty much how a lot of movies ended. They just have this random jolt ending because studios wanted everyone to leave the theater with a big jolt. They just couldn't leave well enough alone half the time.
And in a weird way, as much as I wouldn't like this, but there is a way you could have had both of them together. Like there is a way you could have cut it, maybe, where the aliens are searching and then cut back to them still making out, and then see the dog. Because there's no reason why the two endings can't exist together in the same universe. They don't contradict each other at all. So it's just that I feel like one's better than the other. And quite frankly, I didn't want Cynthia to become a zombie. If anybody Chris became a zombie, he should have been the one to be like, oh, the cute little doggy funk. So now Cynthia gets to be the hero of the next movie.
Well, no, the next movie, I'll say this right now. The next movie could still have Tom Atkins return if you go with the dog ending and you explain it like they did between Halloween 2 and 4. Fucking Michael Myers blew up at the end of 2. There is no explaining that, but you can explain the hell out of it with Halloween 4. Oh, he went into a coma. He didn't blow out his eyes. He could see all that other crap that makes no sense whatsoever.
Are you, Kevin? Are you suggesting, Kevin, that there is a way we could bring back like Tom Atkins with like horrible burns all over the right side of his face?
Yes, you know what?
And they would make perfect jokes about it the rest of the movie too.
It would be like Dark Man.
Oh yes, Tom Atkins is Dark Man. Yeah.
You remember Dark Man? We had a conversation. He should never. He was in a lab that literally blew up, and his body just shoots up in the air and lands in the river.
Oh yeah. There's no way. There's no way to survive that. There's no physics that would have accounted for that.
But Fred Decker's a good enough writer to explain it away.
Yeah. Yes, he is.
Or they would just be no, we don't have time for that. Keep moving on with the plot.
Just have Tom Atkins in a 40-year coma and wakes up.
And he's like, what the F just happened? All right.
Oh my God. This calls for a fan fiction novel or story. Someone needs to write. If you're listening to our conversation right now, someone needs to make a fan fiction sequel to Night of the Creeps where Tom Atkins' character survives somehow and you explain it. That would be awesome.
Please send it to our Patreon page after you go for our cause. And we will surely shout you out on the next episode because we will love to read your fanfic.
Oh Jesus! So, with that being said, we've talked a lot about this movie now, and I have to know some of your final thoughts for this movie, especially people watching it for the first time, because this right now is a film that I think we can all agree that everyone should watch, whether you watch the original theatrical version or the director-approved version.
Yeah. Will you go first, Sarah?
Yeah. I mean, it's very self-aware. It's very fun. We haven't even really gotten into the special effects of it at all either, which there were parts that were a little rough, but they're very cheesy. Like when the bus driver's eyes pop out of his face, in shock. But if you like B movies, this is 100% what you need in your life.
Oh, I love the way you put that. It is 100% what you need in your life, for sure.
It's a great example of an 80s B movie. It is an excellent example of an 80s B movie that works even now, despite this so-called cheesy special effects sometimes.
Hey, that's what B movies had. That's what makes it really well done.
Yeah, and really, and if you think about it, the 50s B movies would have good characterization sometimes and really interesting stories, but the monsters look stupid. The whole thing just loses it once they show the monster. And then you get in the 80s, you have the opposite happening, usually. Not with this movie, but usually the opposite happens to where the characterization is terrible, the acting is deplorable, the writing is barely there, but the monster looks freaking amazing. The special effects, the practical, everything looks incredible, but nothing else works. This movie, for the most part, everything except for a few things here and there, all kind of jive. And so it really kind of is right in hits that sweet spot, right in the middle of what a really effective B movie should be.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
And of course, it's got Tom Atkins at his finest, being his most manly and his oh, by the way, if you also want to know, speaking of memes, this is the origin of that meme of you may be cool, but you will never be as cool as Tom Atkins in a white suit on a beach sipping a pina colada with shades on. This is where that comes from, this movie, when he's having a dream sequence that gets disturbing. But yeah, that's as cool as he's probably ever going to be in a movie. Yeah. And, well, you know what? I had a Schwarzenegger alternator for this, but I think I'm going to let it go for now because Thrill Me, even though I'm not sure if it works coming out of Chris's mouth later on in the movie, but Thrill Me, I think, deserves to be on T-shirts everywhere, as do most of the lines in this thing. But I will rate this movie, and I think the one object in this movie that kind of defines it is Mr. Atkins' mustache. That beautiful, crisp gray, perfectly symmetrical on both sides mustache. He doesn't always have it. Like, he didn't have it in The Fog, I think. And yeah, that's the one where
he's not a cop.
He's not a cop, and he and he has a relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis. So yeah, two universes come together. But yeah, there's so many fun jokes around that too. But so I would rate this movie. I'm gonna say 3.5 Tom Atkins mustaches.
Okay. So, Panozzo, if you remember with Thomas and I, he likes to rate the movies based on something that is in the movie. So he's got his 3.5 Tom Atkins' mustaches. I'm gonna rate it a little higher because only because I actually enjoy this movie more now than I did when I was a kid, because I actually get a lot of the references now. I did not get a lot of the references when I saw this in 80, whatever 80 it was. I get them now, and I think it's a much stronger film than what it was when I originally saw it. So I'm gonna rate it 4 of Tom Atkins' stellar mustaches. I don't know if you want to join us on this, Panozzo, or not, but you're more than welcome to.
I was going to say, Kevin, I kind of agree with you. Like, it's coming at it now in today's day and age. It's looking back on like B movies, like it is every kind of trope you could possibly follow. It's a lot of fun. It's the only movie I've ever seen that has a skull that smiles. But I'm going to give it 4.5 mustaches.
4, that's good. That's good. So everyone out there, my little 5 cents about Night of the Creeps is that it is actually a kind of a great melding of everything that was great about the 80s in terms of both sci-fi, horror, and comedy, which is very rare because in the 80s, comedy didn't always get its due in a horror comedy. It was a lot of hit and miss. This one, it actually works really well because it's not really jokey. It comes out of the characters and actually comes out of the actions because it is a bunch of space slugs turning people into the best of zombies. And then, of course, you have Tom Atkins chewing scenery like it's second nature to him. He has some of the best lines of any film he's ever been in, and it's still one of my favorite films that he's ever been in addition to Halloween 3, of course, and The Fog. You can't get those two. But
go wrong. And let me briefly say out there, ladies and gentlemen, to you guys who are girls and everyone else who's listening, we've talked a lot about this movie, but we have not even scratched the surface of the possibilities of enjoyment that you may have when you watch this. We have not spoiled so many moments on here. Like, there's so many things that you may find that you may cling to. So go ahead and give this a watch. It's free to watch on Pluto TV with the director's cut version. What did it say?
Thanks for mentioning that because they can watch the director's cut on Pluto TV.
Well, Pluto TV, like the planet that's not a planet anymore.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah and Thomas, for this conversation in horror. Everyone out there, we hope that you go and check out this movie, Night of the Creeps, if you've never seen it before. Also, make sure to check out some of our other Zombie Appreciation Month films that we've been talking about this month. And make sure to find us on social media out there. Subscribe, like, and, become huge fans of us because we have lots of stuff coming up for you. And don't forget to look up what we do have coming up after the month of zombie appreciation is over. Thank you so much for joining us on Conversations in Horror. We were just talking about Night of the Creeps. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a pleasant day.
Brains.
Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.